You know that if you watch this channel, one of our reference loudspeakers is the Q Acoustics Concept 300. Now, compared to other Q Acoustic products, the Concept 300 isn't inexpensive, but compared to other brands, it's a relative value. And that's what Q Acoustics is known for, making high-style, high-value, high-performing loudspeakers that reach well above their price points. And their newest loudspeaker, the 3050i Tower, is no exception. But I wanted to know, just how high does this loudspeaker reach? Could it even give Q Acoustics flagship speakers a run for their money? So settle in, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, because today we are reviewing Q Acoustics 3050i Tower loudspeakers. The 3050i is a two-way bass reflex tower loudspeaker in the classic Q Acoustics style. This means a 1-inch decoupled tweeter sandwiched between two 6.5-inch mid-bass drivers, all configured in a Diapolito style array. Now, there is a large rear-facing bass port that helps augment the speaker's bottom end, giving it a reported frequency response of 44 to 30 kilohertz. Now, the 3050i's cabinet may look very similar to the previous generation, but it has been completely redesigned, at least internally, borrowing some techniques from their flagship loudspeaker, the Concept 500. It uses P2P bracing or point-to-point bracing to cut down on unwanted resonance. And around back there has been another noticeable change from the previous generation. The new 3050i uses low-profile 5-way binding posts that are capable of accepting all types of different speaker wire, but unlike the previous generation, the new 3050i is no longer bi-wire or bi-amp capable. Now, to test the 3050i in stereo as well as home theater when using the matching Q Acoustic loudspeakers, we used a variety of budget and some not-so-budget components. First, we started with AV receivers and the Denon S960H, followed by our Sony 1080, the Yamaha 3080, and then lastly the NAD T778. Now, for integrated amplifiers, we stepped things up just a little bit using our name Unity Atom, but we also tried it with the Musical Fidelity M3SI as well as the M5SI integrated amplifiers. Now, we listened to a lot of music, not to mention watched a lot of movies through this system, and all of the source material was either streamed through our name Unity Atom or through our NVIDIA Shield, which was connected to our LG 8K TV, all of which we will link to down in the description below. In terms of style, there is no confusing the 3050i for anything other than a Q Acoustics loudspeaker. It comes in your choice of 4 finishes, black, white, gray, or walnut, which makes it a little bit difficult to decide which one you want. We ultimately chose the black as I felt that that was going to be the most common for home theater use. Thankfully, all of the finishes are matte in nature, and I quite like the contrasting gloss bezel that surrounds each of the speaker's drivers. I just think it's a really slick and clean look, but I understand if you feel differently, in which case you can cover it all up using the included magnetic grills. Still, at this price point, I do consider the 3050i's to be one of the more forward-thinking, minimal, design-conscious loudspeakers on the market right now. As far as sound goes, the 3050i's definitely have a signature, and that signature leans towards neutral. And as a result, careful system matching is a must in order to maximize this loudspeaker's potential. Now, when mated to more affordable receivers like the Denon S960H or even our reference Sony 1080, a lot of the traits of the 3050i that I have come to love, like its clear mid-range, clean highs, and taut bass, were altered or glossed over altogether. For example, the Denon S960H definitely over-accentuated the speaker's lower mid-bass and bass, and as a result, the sound was just really chesty and, well, woolly. In comparison, the Sony definitely tightened up the bass, but took a bit of sweetness out of the mid-range while definitely sharpening the high frequencies. Now, I did prefer Sony's take on the 3050i's sound to that of the Denon, but neither really were my preference. Now, pairing the speakers to our name Unity Atom proved game-changing for the 3050i, if not just a little bit unfair. Yes, bass was deep and taut and now very well balanced with the rest of the speaker's frequency response. The mid-range was clean, articulate, and had just a touch of sweetness without seeming overly warm or romanticized. And the high frequencies were exactly how I like them. Airy, extended, detailed, without being forward or aggressive. And to be honest, I could have lived with this pairing long-term and just called it a day, but I just don't think that a lot of people are going to pair a sub $1,000 speaker like the 3050i with a $3,000+ integrated like the name Unity Atom. So the search for a more fiscally appropriate integrated was underway. Now, pairing these speakers with the Musical Fidelity M3 SI as well as the M5 SI integrated amplifiers proved to be a good fit. Through either integrated, bass did seem to pick up a few more pounds as well as a little bit more detail down low. The mid-range was largely unchanged compared to the name. It still was sweet, very detailed, and ever so slightly warm. But for the most part, the name and musical fidelity performance throughout the mid-range on these speakers was about equal. The high frequencies did lose a little bit of top-end sparkle, but definitely gained more detail and air and decay. A lot of emphasis on the decay. And both of these integrated amplifiers were capable of coaxing all of this performance out of the 3050i, though I will admit the costlier M5 SI did a mildly better job as it relates to bass control and high frequency extension compared to the M3 SI, but both were very good. Now, as far as dynamics are concerned, the 3050i is not a loudspeaker that is difficult to drive to near concert-like levels. But dynamics are just not all about volume. In fact, you want a side order of control with your SPL. But this is where budget electronics can sort of give up or quit on the 3050i. For example, you can be watching your favorite movie or listening to your favorite music, just trucking along at a pretty nice clip, when suddenly there is a loud crescendo or a jump scare. And that is when these speakers can go from sounding pleasant to shouty. But that's on the receiver. And if you pair these loudspeakers with budget electronics from the likes of, say, Denon, Marantz, or even Sony, you may experience this. But if you pair these speakers to more competent, to say higher end components, I think you're going to find that their dynamic prowess is pretty darn impressive. In fact, a lot of those dynamic leaps, the jumps, those crescendos, sound very natural and organic indeed, rising to their peak very naturally, but coming right back down to earth just as quickly. Which brings me to the 3050i's soundstage. These speakers are very good at imaging, especially when it comes to center imaging and detail between the speakers themselves. Now, ultimate fidelity and detail does fade a little bit as you venture further out from their outer boundaries, but on a whole, the soundstage is pretty darn impressive. And for a tower speaker such as this, they are capable of disappearing orally when set up correctly. As far as two-channel listening goes, the 3050i is a great choice. But where I really fell in love with this speaker was for home theater use, when I used it alongside its matching center surrounds and subwoofers driven by the NAD T778. This setup was huge fun and arguably the best configuration that I put together during our review period. For this setup had all of the refinement, all of the energy, all of the detail, all of the scale, all of the dynamics that I could possibly want in a home theater. And while not inexpensive on a whole, I do think that it would be very difficult to beat a system such as this for less. I especially loved the B12 subwoofer, as I found its performance to be phenomenal, and not just for the price. This sucker can play deep. Yes, it will shake your furniture and rattle your walls, but all that childish stuff aside, it is incredibly articulate and nuanced and brings a lot of detail to the mix. So as good as I think the 3050i's are in the bass department, I actually think that you could save a few bucks by going with the 3010 home theater system, which comes with the B12, still power it with the NAD 778 and be just as happy. A little minor note about the matching center speaker. It sounds just a little bit constrained compared to the open sound of the 3050i's. It's a great match for the bookshelf loudspeakers, but maybe not the perfect match in terms of scale when compared to the towers. The biggest drawback that I see to this loudspeaker is this. While not a difficult speaker to drive, it's a very easy speaker to drive wrong. You don't have to go broke on electronics, but you do need to make sure to get the right ones. Pairing this with an inexpensive receiver from the likes of Denon was a less than satisfactory experience. But stepping things up to the Musical Fidelity M3SI or NAD T778 was a great experience. While these speakers may have a new internal bracing scheme, they are definitely resonant down towards the base of the speaker itself, and it's not hard to excite those resonances. This is why careful placement and proper amplification is key. You need to give these speakers just a little bit of room to breathe, not to mention power them with an amplifier that can properly control their drivers, because if you don't do this, the bass can become very overwhelming fast and maybe even come off as muddy. Up top, around the drivers themselves, the cabinet feels very inert, and this is why the mid-range and tweeters sound very clean by comparison. Still, it is because of the bass that I think that some of you would actually be better off with the Q Acoustics bookshelves mated with the B12 subwoofer over the towers. Aside from those two notes, I really don't think that there's anything about this speaker that you need to be wary of. The fit and finish is fantastic, their way with music and movies is equally impressive, and they're not that large or that prohibitively expensive given their performance. In terms of comparable loudspeakers, we have Fluence's new Reference series. Now, the Reference series will play lower than the 3050i, but both speakers have the same problem as it relates to bass, and that you have to just be really careful with setup to avoid the bass becoming just too much of a good thing. Now, the Fluence is more affordable in direct comparison to the 3050i, but when set up correctly, I do think that the Q Acoustic towers are a little bit more refined. That said, the Fluences are going to be smoother, a little bit warmer, which may or may not be a good thing for you. And unlike the Q Acoustics, they aren't as heavily influenced by your associated equipment. That is to say that you're not going to really dramatically alter their sound given whatever you attach them to, quite in the same way that you can with the Q Acoustic towers. Now, the Yamo C97 Mark II is definitely a more lively and dynamic loudspeaker, and it has far more control over its bass in more situations in direct comparison to the 3050i. Now, I'm not going to say that the Yamo C97 IIs are neutral. They definitely have a sound, and I happen to like that sound. But if you're someone that likes to err more on the side of neutrality, I do think the Q Acoustic towers are probably going to be a better fit. And now you might be asking yourself, well, how does the 3050i compare to the flagship Concept Series speakers from Q Acoustics? And the truth is it doesn't. It doesn't. And I don't think you should expect it to, but I understand why you might expect it to, because if you watch or read reviews of the 3050i's on the internet, you're probably thinking that it's this huge giant killer, and the giant that it's trying to kill is its own stablemates, the Concept 300 and 500. And I'm sorry, it just doesn't do that. The 3050i is a great speaker in its own right. It may even be a great speaker at or above its price point, but it does not, well, punch 5 times above its weight class. It just doesn't do that. But I understand that the Concept 300 and Concept 500 speakers are cost prohibitive to a lot of people, in which case I will make the argument that the 3050i is a great option. I continue to be impressed by the sheer number of sub $1,000 tower loudspeakers on the market right now that have a great price to performance ratio, and I consider the Q Acoustics 3050i's to be among that group. While not a set it and forget it speaker, you do have to take some special precautions with respect to setup or pairing it with the right electronics, but once you get everything for the most part right, the performance that these towers are capable of dishing out is really impressive. As the centerpiece of a 5.1 home theater system, I really liked them. So yes, they are good for music, but I think they're great for home theater. So that's it. That is my review of Q Acoustics 3050i tower loudspeaker. What did you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, my question for you is this. What is your favorite sub $1,000 tower loudspeaker currently available on the market right now? Let's get a big old list going down in the comments. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and ring the bell so that you are notified when new videos come out. If you used any of the links that Christy left you down in the description below, know that that's a great way that you guys have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here, and we thank you very, very much. You can follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile for more hi-fi audio gadgets, tech, all that stuff. I'm very active over there. You can follow me there. And I think that's it. So remember, the only person that has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much again for watching, and we will see you on the next video. Bye. So settle in, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, because today we are reviewing Q Acoustics Yeah.
That was perfect!
Yeah, I know.
What the
I don't know what happened. Q Acoustics.
Oh my god!
I know, it was pretty good.
We were gonna be able to move on.
Yeah, all right. Don't jinx it.